Chapter 5. Calling Dr. Fargo. In later years, Henry couldn't remember who screamed first. All he could recall was that both he and Mrs. Kimmelfarber were yelling their heads off, and that Nurse Marley Farthing was as cool as a cantaloupe. Calm down, both of you, she said. Mrs. Kimmelfarber, you and go call Mrs. Green on the telephone. Tell her we're taking Henry to the city hospital. Mrs. Kimmelfarber didn't move. She just stood there with her mouth open, staring at Henry. You scoot now, insisted Nurse Farthing in a stern tone. Hush! Swoosh! Off with you! And you, Henry Green, she said as Mrs. Kimmelfarber left the room, are coming with me. Let us go. Quietly, calmly. She took his hand, and once again Henry noticed that it felt good and somehow made him feel better. He kept holding on to her cool hand as they left the school. All the way to the hospital, as the taxi sped along, Henry held fast to the calm, steady hand of Nurse Marley Farthing. In fact, it wasn't until he'd been checked by two different doctors and was waiting to be examined by the hospital's chief of children's medicine, Dr. Fargo, that he dared let go. What? 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 Said Dr. Fargo as he came bounding into the examining room. He was a small, round man with a bushy white mustache and had a confused look on his face. What do we have here, eh? He asked. Boy looks like he fell into a mud puddle. He leaned down close, so close to Henry's nose that Henry could smell his puffy breath. It smelled like peppermints. Didn't fall into a mud puddle, did you, lad? No, sir. Didn't think so, said Dr. Fargo. Too bad. Would have explained those big brown spots all over you. Well, then, he said, turning to Nurse Marley Farthing, tell me things. You're not going to believe this, Doctor, Nurse Farthing began, as she told Dr. Fargo about the events of the morning. I'm not going to believe this, Dr. Fargo repeated when she had just finished. It's impossible. No rash in the whole history of rashes ever appeared so fast, or grew so big, or popped out with a noise you could hear. Impossible! It happened, said Nurse Farthing. So I see. Well, we'll soon get to the bottom of this, or my name's not. What is my name, by the way? Dr. Fargo, I believe. Pleased to meet you, son, he said, Dr. Fargo, and he shook Henry's hand. Ought to do something about those big brown spots, though. Yes, sir, said Henry, who was beginning to feel confused himself. Dr. Fargo took Henry to the examining table and switched on the big lamp. For a full 5 minutes he said nothing but and ha as he poked and prodded Henry. He looked at very big brown spots and at all the bare spots in between the brown spots. He looked with a magnifying glass and without a magnifying glass, in Henry's eyes and ears and nose and even under his tongue. Finally he said, I don't know any more than what I started. They looked like your typical big brown spots, except, of course, in the whole history of the civilized world, there had never been a case of big brown spots before. I'm frightened, said Henry. I'm Dr. Fargo, said the doctor. That much I know. Now, what I'd like to do is get to know more about these brown spots of yours. He wet a tip of a cotton swab and brushed it gently against one of the big brown spots on Henry's right arm. Ouch, said Henry. Did that hurt? No. Then why did you say ouch? Because, Henry said, I thought it was going to hurt. I see, said Dr. Fargo, shaking his head as he put the cotton swab into the glass jar. Take this to the laboratory at once, he said to one of his assistants, and the man rushed out of the room. In a few minutes we'll know more about those big brown spots of yours, the doctor said. Hands behind his back, he began to pace the room. Suddenly he stopped, his nose in the air. Who has been eating a candy bar in my office? He demanded. No one answered. Dr. Fargo's nose twitched from side to side as he sniffed the air. I smell a candy bar, he said. Someone's been eating a candy bar. Just then the telephone rang, and Dr. Fargo bounded across the room to answer. What? He said into the phone. Are you sure? His white mustache bunched up and down, and as Dr. Fargo sank slowly into his chair, he put down the telephone, a look of amazement on his face. Chocolate, he said. Those big brown spots are pure chocolate. Chocolate, gasped Nurse Farthing. Chocolate, exclaimed Henry Green. Chocolate, echoed Dr. Fargo's two assistants. Exactly, said Dr. Fargo. The boy, it seems, is nothing more than a walking candy bar.